So this afternoon, we're fortunate to have Randy with us. He's a college professor, teaches electronics, and he is one of our club's best experts at hi-fi. And so today he's going to give you the lecture on how to have a great hi-fi system without having to spend tens of thousands of dollars. So, Randy, it's all yours. Go for it.
Wow, I hope I have more people than this at my performance tonight, but we'll see how that goes. I see you out there. Let's see if this thing will... Oh, sounds like my dentist when he's working on my teeth. Okay, unfortunately, I left my presentation on my laptop at home. So we're going to have to just kind of wing through what I remember on that, and then later on he's going to actually put up the PowerPoint that would have gone with this presentation. So at any rate, is this close enough? I can hear myself pretty well. This is yeah, okay. So today's talk is about affordable hi-fi audio systems. It's not hard, and made from vintage gear. It's not hard to put together one from vintage gear or new gear that's pretty pricey, but you can actually put together something that is quite sonically encompassing, pulls you into the music, and enjoyable for not a lot of money. Probably about the same amount of money you'd spend on your cell phone or something like that. And it will last a lot longer than your cell phone. Most of these components are probably my age, maybe a little younger, but not a whole lot younger. So we can get at least one generation out of them. Okay, so first of all, when we speak about hi-fi, what are we really talking about? We're talking about the ability of a sound reproduction system to be able to pull the information that's recorded on record, on digital, like a CD, or on reel-to-reel tape, although I don't consider reel-to-reel tape, for the most part, the commercial stuff, to be high fidelity, and be able to present it to you in a way that kind of pulls you in and sounds like not music, but performers making music, whether it's an orchestra or a jazz group or rock musicians. There's a little problem with rock music because a lot of that has a tendency to be manipulated a lot in the recording venue when they're doing that, although some of the live stuff can be somewhat reasonably good sounding. So the ability to do that really requires that your system be able to tonally get correct your sounds that you're listening to. In other words, a violin should sound like a violin. A viola should sound like a viola, not a violin. A bass, you should be able to distinguish between the different notes as the guy is playing different notes on the bass. You should be able to distinguish between a Telecaster and a Stratocaster. And so those are some of the aspects of tonality that you need. The other aspect that you really want is what a lot of people refer to as Pratt, pace, rhythm, and timing. In other words, the music must have some kind of propulsion to it, a propulsive feel, and that is often brought about by the equipment being able to correctly reproduce the coherence of the music and the time that it's being played relative to different instruments. Finally, the system should be able to present a three-dimensional image, if you will, sound stage, acoustic bubble, that sounds like people playing, not from the speakers, but from the area between, behind, and somewhat outside of the speakers. And if you can do that, then you're well on your way to having something that sounds reasonably good. Now, I'm not going to talk other than maybe one or two times to say, you can put a lipstick on Pig, but it isn't Marilyn Monroe. You're not going to get a good sound system with really cheap equipment. And unfortunately, a lot of the cheap equipment a lot of the equipment that was made and sold was cheap equipment, and it's just really not worth your time or investment of money, because you can actually put together, as I said, something for, well, this system here was, this was definitely on the low end of what I was able to purchase it for, but $1,000, this system here was about $400 worth of stuff that I put together here. So it can be done fairly cheaply. So the first thing we want to talk about as far as equipment is the speaker amplifier combination. That's going to determine a lot. I see you laughing over there, Paul. That's going to determine a lot of how well your system's going to be and how it's going to sound, because primarily you have two ways to go. You can go with high efficiency speakers like these clip horns that I have up here in front, and with those you have a wide variety of amps that you can use. Particularly horn speakers that have efficiency of 95 to 99 decibels, you can run them off of a 5 to 10 watt amplifier and get SPLs in your room, not this place of course, but in your listening room that will provide a realistic imaging quality to the music. Now, the other way to go with those, and I should mention, as I was going to mention whenever I put this PowerPoint together and left it at home, a lot of the amplifier, that allows you with these to utilize a lot of relatively inexpensive tube amps. And tube amps are particularly well suited for those types of speakers that have horns in them and are fairly efficient because of the load combination and the phase irregularities that are present in multi-driver acoustic suspension type speakers. So I know a lot of people are looking at amps, and nowadays, I don't know what's happened in the last 5 to 10 years, but nowadays there's been a huge buying frenzy of hi-fi gear, and it's driving up the price, particularly solid state gear, but it's also leached down into the tube gear as well. So if you were looking for a tube amplifier to go with some speakers like this, or similar speakers like the KLH, the Klipschorn Heresy speakers, also the JBL L100s, very popular. There was a lot of those around. Speakers by Altec Lansing, and numerous other manufacturers, many who started in the 40s and 50s making speaker systems that would later become the cornerstone for a lot of their products moving forward. Paul Klipsch started his company in 1943, I think it was, and was, because at that time he needed something that was efficient that could run off of a 5-watt amplifier, because that was pretty much all there was. So as far as amplifiers out there, things like the Scott 299 series, the Fisher, a lot of the Fisher gear, the lower price ones like the 100s, 101s, the Fisher 400, although that is another topic to talk about as far as getting the best sound quality out of that, and then some of the Sherwood components, which many people consider to be very good sounding. But in addition to that, what I've found is also really those what I just mentioned, you're probably looking at something around $400 to $600 to $800 for those, hopefully restored. And I saw some of those up at Cutdown last month for that price range. Now, as far as something even, are there lower price amplifiers that you can get? Yes. Particularly a lot of the mono amps that were sold in the 50s and into the early 60s by people like Bogan. They made a whole line of integrated amplifiers that were relatively inexpensive, that you'd have two separate ones with volume controls and tone controls on them, so they're not quote-unquote stereo. You'd have to adjust each channel, but those are very good amplifiers, and I've seen them at our MAARC meets selling for between 50 and 100 bucks, and you see them at other places going for about the same price. There's the Challenger model as well, which is about 10-watt 6V6, which Steve sold me one of those Bogans for, I think it was $40. And that's a great little amplifier. And there are a number of the ICO HF20 is another inexpensive amplifier, a lot of power, great transformer, not a lot of power, 20 watts, great transformers, and a good front end. Others would, of course, include the ICO ST series like the ST40 integrated and the ST70 integrated, which Dave has, one that I made, I guess, last year. Fix that up. That thing will drive the piss out of these. But those are some of the models out there. And, of course, the Dynaco SCA35 integrated. I've tended to stick with integrated amps because, for the most part, preamps are not near as common as power amps. And they're usually, a lot of the ones that you could buy to drive a power amp would not necessarily sound that good. And that's been one of the kind of the lull points as far as trying to match up something that's affordable across the chain. So that's one way of going. The other way to go is with your acoustic suspension speakers, of which there are tons of out there. However, stereo really started taking off with the acoustic suspension speaker system because they could be made relatively small and had they had greater wife acceptance factor than these behemoths that I've got in front of you. But they do require a lot of power too to get a good presence of sound. That usually requires solid state amplifiers. And most solid state amplifiers that are any good are getting increasingly expensive in price. Stuff like the MAARC 22XX series, the slide rule receivers. I see them now, you could have gotten them 10 years ago for $25, $50. Now they're hitting $1,000 easily for restored versions. The MAARC 1030s and 1060s, those are also good solid state amplifiers. The Sansui AU190, another classic solid state amplifier that really sounds good. However, with a lot of solid state amplifiers, much like a lot of acoustic suspension speakers, there were a lot of really crappy ones out there. And those are the ones that you see the most of because those are the ones that were made the most. If I were looking I wouldn't be looking for an acoustic suspension speaker because I don't really like them, but if you were looking for something along that line that you might find, it would be something like the Advent speakers, the AR3As. I used to have both the Advents for a long time, and they were great speakers for that time period with a powerful SAE 400, which was pretty expensive back then, but it's pretty cheap nowadays. Except for the lack of a preamp. And then the Dynaco A25 and the bigger brother, the A50, which doesn't sound as good as the A25, but those don't have the great low end for driving the sound out and getting it to where it sounds like something live in your listening room. But with that said, shall we play some music, Maestro? Sweetenly? Okay. So that you can get an idea, somewhat. The people have been asking me, stop talking, play some music. We've been doing all this talk at presentations, but we want to hear what something good sounds like. Let's try this. I carry this around, do I just turn it on? It's on. It is on? It is on. I should play Europe 72 for Roy. As is for a lot of you people, but that's really one of the well-recorded and great album by Hank Mobley, one of his big selling albums. So with that in mind, we were talking about acoustic suspension speakers with powerful amplifiers. Lower powered transistor amplifiers can also be pretty good with horns, but they can tend to be a little toppy and strange sounding. But in this case here, I am using a solid state amplifier to punch all this music out to you guys, because my Scott 299 wouldn't quite fill this, because it's only about 15 watts and this is about 30 watts. But it actually does sound better even than this Technics, which is actually pretty decent. So we've kind of covered speakers and amplifiers. So let's see, what else do we want to talk about? I guess our source, what we're using for our music to bring it in to you guys to listen to, that you're going to play it on, whether it's a turntable or it's a CD player or a digital streaming service or something like that, because all of those are available. As it stands right now, CD players, I don't know if they're still making those. I don't see them near as much as I used to. And the only ones I do see are occasionally what shows up at MAARC or at a yard sale or something of that nature. And the problem with CD players right now is that they do, over time, the lasers start going bad, and then getting replacements can be a real problem. But you may be able to do what a lot of people do with VCRs. Once it goes bad, they'll grab another one, since there were so many of them that were made out there. Now, a lot of CD players are not great, but digits being digits, it's a matter of just having a back-end system from the CD player leading into your integrated amplifier is going to give you good sound. And the one nice thing about CDs is that there are so many made, and they are very inexpensive source of music that you can pick up relatively cheap. You can also, though, pick up records. There's been a whole revolution in records. I'm a big fan of vinyl because I find that it tends to pull me into the music more than digital audio does. I know that there are people who are not big fans of it because of all the fuss, but I like the ritual of putting on a record and cleaning it, as does Paul, because he has records as well on his system at home. The Year of the Cat, as I recall, from one of them. But at any rate, records have been undergoing a resurgence. The value of a lot of the older records are getting up. If you're a classic music aficionado, there is a lot of records that are not terribly expensive out there if you look around. And these are good pressings, good original pressings that will sound wonderful on your hi-fi system. And as regards to digital audio, that is something that is also becoming very, very popular within the hi-fi audio community. The problem with that is that the audio files, you'll have to have a DVD player to rip them if you're getting them from CDs. If you're purchasing them as high-res files, that can get pretty pricey. The hardware is not terribly inexpensive either as compared to, say, finding a decent turntable. Now, with regards to turntables, there are a number of different ways to go. This one here is a direct drive Technics. There were a lot of really, really crappy digital drive turntables out there. This one is actually, with the cartridge and everything, ready to go, just like we're playing it today. It's going to be one of the items in the MAARC raffle. So you're getting a chance to actually hear it working in person right here. Is that good for you, John? All right, that's what I like. So this will be available. It does have a pretty good cartridge, a mid-level cartridge, has a new stylus in there, so it'll do you for about 500 to maybe 800 hours before you'll need to replace it. Finding the stylus are, there are a lot of Chinese-made stylus out there that will do the job. They're pretty cheap compared to what you used to pay. But if you go and get something better, like the Japanese made styluses, they are much better and they will sound much better as well too. So let's see. Let's hear some more music. I'm tired of talking. It was a long drive up here. Yes, sir. Wait, why do we hand him the microphone? Can I speak on this as well now, or is this muted out?
My question relates to your comments about digital audio. What happens when the original recording is made in digital format rather than an analog recording that is transferred to a digital format for playback like a CD?
Okay, let me see. Is this mic not up here? Yeah. Oh, okay, so we can leave that floating around so you people can ask questions as you go. Well, often what happens is that as you convert the analog file to digital, the digital file itself should, by all rights, be as good, if not better sounding. A lot of that, though, depends on the person who's mastering it from the original recording, assuming we're using that. But early on, a lot of recordings that were put on CDs were made from second and third generation safety and running masters that would have a generational loss of about 3 decibels every time that is re-recorded. Where you see that a lot at is in the Beatles recordings. When the Beatles made their first early albums, they did not really do much track bouncing. And so pretty much, particularly the first album, has a nice kind of open, airy sound to it that's not apparent on their later albums, which tend to sound muddy, a little bit compressed. And that was because they would bounce from the tracks from one track to another track, combine those together, open up that earlier track and use to record, I don't know, vocal or marimba or whatever it was that they were doing. So you get an album like Sgt. Pepper's, and it's not great sounding. It doesn't really have a lot of fidelity because of all of the generational loss as they bounce from track to track. This is much more common with rock music than it is with classical or jazz, because a lot of people who made classical and jazz records were really music purists, and they wanted to get a sound that was as close to a live person performing in the audience. With digital audio, you should be getting better sound quality. However, and I don't know why, because I have both CD and DVD audio and SACD format discs to play back on a reasonably nice player. I enjoy the music, but after a CD, I'm kind of like, okay, time to go take out the trash, paint the house, mow the lawn, I don't know, whatever it is. Whereas with a record, I just put one on, I listen to it, put on another one, and another one, another one, and then my wife is yelling at me, and it just seems to pull you in. And often I will sit there reading textbooks and stuff like that for whatever class I'm taking, or reading stuff about audio, and I will get to the end of a page and I'll go like, what did I just read? I don't remember any of that. Because I've gotten to where the music has surreptitiously pulled me into what's going on. Yes, sir, Ted? Well, I got to hand you the microphone.
Do you have a formula for cleaning your LPs?
I do. I just got it last year finally, and as an ultrasonic cleaning machine. There are other ways to use the spin clean, which is relatively inexpensive, about $100, I think. I've used those for years, and that's pretty good, but most people in the audio community are moving to ultrasonics.
Something with alcohol and distilled water.
Some people are pro-alcohol, some people are anti-alcohol, saying that it solubilizes some of the components of the actual vinyl formulation. I don't know. That's a good question. I know you don't want to use alcohol on any shellac discs, so if you're playing 78s, no, don't do that. Yes, sir.
You mentioned older records as a possible source of the music. Can you give any general guidelines for selecting older records that will play well, whether it's in terms of brand or how do you look at, I mean, if you see big scratches, obviously you don't use it.
Right.
But what are some general guidelines for selecting good records out of a basket of them that may be mostly bad?
Well, there were certainly a number, particularly in the 50s and early 60s, of audiophile labels. In the classical realm, this was audio high fidelity was a big thing for those people. Harry Belloc, who started Belloc Recordings that were issued on Everest, he poured a lot of money from his missile making business for the government into setting up this high-end, no holds barred type of recording system. And those records, when you find an Everest record, unfortunately I don't have one with me here, but when you find those can be really quite amazing sounding. Wasn't a lot of them, but they were quite amazing. However, he did sell the company, I think, in 62, 63, and afterwards, those were reissued by the person who bought them, and those sound absolutely horrible. Because I bought some of them, in fact, I was going to bring one with me, and I thought there was something had blown up in my hi-fi system was so bad. And then I researched it and realized that these were coming off of old tape reels and run by Howdy Doody at the mastering labs or something like that. So it was definitely, even in labels, a lot of them can really sound quite different from pressing to pressing. But usually the earliest pressings are the ones that were the best.
How do you tell if a record you're looking at is an early pressing?
Well, you have to kind of know what you're looking for, right? I mean, if I had a secret formula, I could sell that and be a millionaire. But there is a lot of sites out there that talk about record labels and records that are really good. Now, if you're a classic music aficionado, one label that was really good on their recording quality was EMI. However, EMI never released the tapes from England to here. So when we would get them, Capitol was their issuing company. They would take and they would totally screw it up. And so a lot of the Angel recordings, they have a lot of extra reverb. It's very muddy sounding. When you get the original as an EMI pressing, those sound so much better bass, a broader sound stage, and all that sort of stuff, and that really makes a big difference. In fact, I'm going with that line. This was another company that was known for making really good classical records. I don't think they're quite as good as the EMI records, but Mercury made this whole series of live-in presence, and they had a special recording technique that RCA copied later for the RCA Living Stereo. When you see something like this, these are generally really good recordings. However, once again, they would press, I don't know, 1,000, 5,000, whatever, and then someone else would come and recut it, and then you'd get something that was like, oh, what happened, You shouldn't be letting Howdy Doody in the mastering studio. But if you were to see something like this, and I picked this up at a record show for like $5, some of the things you look for is the laminated cover. Also, with these early pressings, these were in color, whereas it was in black and white, and this was not laminated. And there are codes that are in the dead wax. And this is an FR1 coded recording, and it had a plum label as opposed to a purple label. And these can be quite good sounding. Should we listen to it? You want to hear it? Let's hear it. This is just for Roy.
Randy, since you're talking about affordable hi-fi systems today, I think you should emphasize the importance of coming to MAARC auctions. Tell us what you paid for that amplifier that you're demonstrating here.
Ryan, I think Bill wants to use the mic now. Okay, so yeah, the importance of coming to a MAARC auction. Before we jump into the part that Roy will know from this particular piece, you have this amplifier here. I picked this up at a MAARC auction for $5. Now this is kind of an outlier. I knew because of the brand being a Technics that it was, Technics is a pretty good brand. Panasonic, the family who made the equipment, Technics was their higher end quality brand. And this was one of their compact receivers. Like I said, the Scott 299 out there actually will even beat the pants off of this, but it doesn't have enough power to push these speakers. If I'd only bought those Heresies and cuts down. Before we jump into the full overture, so Roy can get his eargasmic experience here, I did want to mention, finding a lot of hi-fi gear it does occasionally show up at MAARC meets. The turntable came from MAARC. I had to rebuild that. It needed some work. And often these direct drive units, the grease and stuff will harden up and turn to super glue. And you have to really be gentle, see if it works, and then clean that all out and refurbish it with new glue. And then you can get a pretty decent sounding receiver. But if I were out looking for a hi-fi system, no doubt in my mind, a vintage system that would be affordable would be Cuts-Down. They have the Cuts-Down radio show twice a year. These speakers came from Cuts-Down. The other turntable I was going to demo up here came from Cuts-Down. And the Scott 299 that I have, which is part of a receiver package, that came from Cuts-Down. Cuts-Down has a huge presence in the audio. A lot of junk there, but there's also a lot of good bargain price and lesser price. As I said, I paid $100 for these, which is, that's peanuts pretty much for something like this. And I'm going to put about another 100 into them with some mods that will really lift up the high end, because these are they're a little light on the higher frequencies, and that can be modified out with some parts that you can find online from enthusiasts. Now, if you're trying to find, going blind, how would I go about looking for what's good and against what's not good? One of the things to do would be to go on some of the audio forums like Audio Karma and look at some of the titles that they've got broken down as far as particular brands, like Sansui, like Kenwood, like Technics and stuff like that, because if enthusiasts are buying that kind of equipment and either modifying it or restoring it, it's probably well worthwhile to look into that kind of equipment. That might be a good starting point. But as in anything, if you really want to get good bang for the buck, good system that you can really enjoy, you do have to do your research. I mean, I've been doing this since I was a teenager. Yes, Ted? Is the quartz drive an improvement in the turntable? It sounds pretty. I'm not a direct drive fan. They are good turntables, but I prefer idler drives, the older idler drives, which need work to get them performing at the levels that they can really play well at. But yeah, I'd say quartz sounds good to me. I mean, it's a slogan. Bill?
Any thoughts about coupling with a AV system? I have a big home theater system, 7.1. So what to do with that, if anything?
I'm not going to tell you what to do with it, but...
In integrating any of what you've got with that, or should it be a totally separate system?
Generally speaking, totally separate, because most AV components, the 5.1 systems and the like, they weren't very well made. They were made for a price, and you got a lot of speakers in there, you got multi-channel amplifiers, decoders, and everything else. That all adds to the final price, and you can't expect to pay $1,000 for one of those and get the same quality that you would out of only 2 amplifiers and 2 speakers, as opposed to 5-channel amplifier and 5 speakers. The 5.1 systems can sound pretty good if they're set up properly, but they are really tricky, particularly with music, even with movies and things like that. Any other questions? Because we're going to wrap up with this for Roy, and then it'll be 4 o'clock in time for everybody to go buy a raffle ticket, right? Isn't that right, Brian? Thank you. Thanks, Paul Ray and the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. Thanks to Roy Stellick, because that's what you wanted. Seems like a good point to end this presentation. Obviously, there's so much to talk about that can be brought around about audio, how to get something affordable, get something that brings joy to your life, because there's nothing like music to bring that joy in and make you want to skip mowing the lawn. Thanks again.